podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
This is the Blue Moon Podcast. Manchester City news, discussion and nostalgia.
After relegation from the Premier League in the year 2001, Manchester City made a change in the dugout. Joe Royle, who had overseen back-to-back promotions in 1999 and 2000, was relieved of his duties, and the man tasked with getting the club back to the top flight was Kevin Keegan. Fans were treated to swashbuckling displays, entertaining football and big wins as City won the second tier in style. Even to this day, with everything that's happened at the club, it remains a favourite season for many fans. During his time at City, Keegan oversaw that return to the Premier League, a move to a new stadium, a return of European football, and a number of remarkable results and performances. After the sad news of his death this week, this is a special Blue Moon podcast looking back at the Kevin Keegan era at Manchester City. I'm David Mooney. I am joined by City fans Liam Wright.
Hello David, how are we doing?
Not too bad, thank you. And Andy MacNab's with us. Hi Andy.
Hi pal, how are you?
Not too bad, thanks. Not too bad. So obviously this is real sad news for this special episode. And obviously Liam Keegan, better known for kind of Newcastle and Liverpool, and then obviously the England managerial job. But this news really affects City fans because, like if City wasn't a big part of Keegan's story, Keegan is a big part of City's.
Definitely. I think as well for a lot of people growing up, like I did in the 90s, we were quite big fans of Kevin Keegan even before he came to City because obviously managing Newcastle like he did, he was a real big part in the sort of, as they used to call it, the ABUs, the Anyone But United fan group. So, and, you know, quite famously his rant about they've got to go to Middlesbrough and all that sort of stuff was stuff that, you know, I was really into anyway. So, yeah, you know, even before he came to City, I feel like a lot of City fans loved him because of that, you know, sort of sticking up against Ferguson. So yeah, you know, it was obviously very sad news. And yeah, as I say, a lot of fans, even before he came through the front door, were into him.
Yeah, I just hope, Andy, that he knew how appreciated he was at City, because obviously he'll get the adulation from Liverpool, from Newcastle, but like he should be getting that from City as well because of what he did at the club.
Yeah, I'm sure he did actually, because I don't think it was ever a secret from City fans that we loved him and we loved what he brought to us. I think most of the City fans I know who ever met him have always been quite clear about the fact they've said to him how much we appreciate what he did for us and how he took us to a place where we really didn't feel we were ever going to get to, where we actually started enjoying our football again as fans. You know, we'd been pretty poor, even though that, don't get me wrong, there was great times, as you know, with Joe Royle, and I don't want to, you know, I would never want to put that down, what Joe did for us, you know, taking us to the Premier League and everything else. But I think with Keegan, it was a style of football that he brought to us, and the players that he brought to us that just, you know, took us to another level, really. And that's what we all, you know, love him for, really, at City. So.
Yeah, well, let's go right back to the start. I've been taking a look at what happened during Kevin Keegan's 3.5 years at City. The chain of events that saw Kevin Keegan join Manchester City begins around autumn in the year 2000. City had begun their first season back in the Premier League fairly steadily, taking 8 points from their first 8 games. But it was in the second international break where the ball started to get rolling. England had just lost a World Cup qualifier to Germany, and Keegan said this after the match.
First of all, I told the players that, you know, this is my last game. I'm very disappointed with the result, obviously not for myself, for the players, because particularly second half they worked very, very hard, for all my staff, and particularly for the FA, and that's why I've been there a long time. You know, all of them, from my chairman right down through Adam Crozier and David Davis, they've been wonderfully supportive of me. I probably have had a longer run than I could have expected. I mean, after Euro 2000, a lot of managers coaches who did a lot better than me fell by the wayside, and their support's been wonderful and makes that very, very difficult for me. But nevertheless, as I told the players, I just don't feel I can quite find that little bit of extra that I think you need at this level to find a winning formula. I just feel I've given it my best shot, and I don't want to go on and outstay my welcome. And I mean, as I say, the FA have been great, and we've been in there for 20 minutes now. More support no manager could have had, but I've not been quite good enough, and I have to accept that.
Over the next 7 months, City battled to stay in the Premier League under Joe Royle. They failed in that task, ultimately being relegated after a defeat at Ipswich in the penultimate game of the season. Royle was sacked that summer, and City approached Keegan. David Bernstein was the City chairman at the time.
We wanted someone who could make a real and immediate impact, and Kevin was certainly an impactful manager, and we knew he was demanding, but at that stage things went very well. He did well in bringing in certain players. He was very inspirational in handling the side. Among the things he did was, of course, bring in Ali Bernabier and Al Berkowitz, two very creative players who people said couldn't play with each other, but in fact did play with each other and played some wonderful, attractive attacking football.
It was an up and down start. City won handsomely one week but got battered the next, and it was only as Keegan started to get some consistency in his team selections that results began to pick up. Back in 2013, Ali Bernabier spoke about joining the club at City Square.
The story is I come training, Kevin Keegan told me, yes, you can come to the club, but I'm not sure that I play or not. And in the Saturday morning, I take my flight, but I don't take. I come on the flight. They say no, it's too late. I say, come on, why it's too late? And I came second flight. I arrived here at 11:15 a.m. and the game it was at I think 1 a.m. No half time, just to put my shirt, go to the stand, and we win 3-0, and standing ovation, 35,000 people. What is the best things to start in a nice team with Manchester City. And I play, I think, 4 games in 3 days, and score goals, score many goals, play with Sean Goater, Paolo Wanchop, enjoy, unbelievable.
In the end, Keegan led City to the Division 1 title, and in some style, winning promotion back to the Premier League weeks before the season ended. At the same time, the team equalled the club record for goals scored in a single campaign, netting 108 in total, and 99 points was a club record too. Here's the football historian Gary James talking about that period.
You'd turn up at Maine Road and you had no idea what you were going to experience under Keegan, and it was always entertaining. You know, you could score 4 goals but you concede 3, and it was that sort of feeling. That's how it was going to be. And even on the last day of the season, it was 108 goals or whatever it was, but it tied our most goals ever we'd scored. All of that was entertaining, and it added to it, and it was Maine Road's last great season, right? And I know we had another season, but this was the last great season at Maine Road. This is a season where we won most of our games. We scored plenty of goals. Whichever game you went to, you felt you were going to be entertained, and I think that's what it was for me.
Back in the top flight, Keegan attracted a calibre of player that was a step up from before. Peter Schmeichel joined as a free agent, while Sylvain Distin and Nicolas Anelka both arrived from PSG. For Anelka, City splashed out a club record fee of £13 million. It was the final season at Maine Road, and the club didn't want to spend it fighting relegation. One of the key results that November was a 3-1 win over Manchester United, City's first derby win since 1989, and a special one with it being the last at Maine Road.
I think the big difference was the crowd. They just seem to find another level today. They've always been very good here, in my year and a bit here, but I thought today it reminded me of when I played in the 70s. It took me right back to that. They were very loud today. They wanted it, and that transferred to the players. So, I mean, tremendous credit to them. They've waited a long time, 13 years. It's a long time to wait, but I hope it's been worth it for them.
Another standout result that season was a 2-1 win at Anfield towards the end of the campaign. It was to be City's last win away at Liverpool in front of fans for 23 years.
Regardless of what people think, I'm an ex-Liverpool player, but when I come here with another club like I did with Newcastle, and like I have here today with Manchester City, I want to win. And I'm very proud of my team. I thought we deserved something out of this game. Maybe in the end, one save from Peter Schmeichel kept us in it, and we went down then and scored the last goal in particular, a very, very good goal. But I think we deserve some out of this game today. And this is not an easy place to come. You have to bring a lot of things with you when you come here. You need team spirit, you need commitment, and you need togetherness. And they're the 3 basic requirements when you come here. I think we had all those today. And in the second half, we had them in abundance, and that eventually won us the day.
Despite a ninth-placed finish and a rather fortuitous qualification for Europe, there were some issues behind the scenes, though. Keegan's determination to sign Robbie Fowler split the boardroom and led to the eventual resignation of David Bernstein.
I prided myself that over the 3 years or 4 years of my chairmanship, we'd had an incredibly unified, disciplined board. But as we got to this stage with Fowler and so on, things began to fragment somewhat. One or two of my colleagues on the board felt we had to support Kevin under virtually any circumstances. I didn't feel that. I'd said we built this club back up based on solid foundations, and I didn't want to jeopardise that.
The squad transformation continued that summer with a combined £5 million spent on Trevor Sinclair and Claudio Reyna, and just under £1 million paid for Antoine Sibierski. Paul Bosvelt joined for an undisclosed fee, and Keegan tried the same trick of signing a veteran goalkeeper, with David Seaman coming in to replace the retiring Peter Schmeichel. Seaman spoke to the podcast recently.
So I played my last game for Arsenal, was the FA Cup final against Southampton, and I didn't know it was my last game. So I always thought, and I always wanted to play another year, at least. And then Man City came in for me, and it was Kevin. I spoke to Kevin, and then once you speak to Kevin, you're signing. Because his enthusiasm is brilliant.
That summer, the club also moved to the City of Manchester Stadium. City beat Barcelona in the first ever match there. 4 days later, the first competitive game there was City's first European tie in 24 years, with the Welsh Premier Division runners-up, TNS. City ran out 5-0 winners.
It was difficult. They came and played with one up, which, is their right, and really, I think, tried a little bit of damage limitation. And for a while, through a culmination of some bad luck from our point of view and some maybe poor final passes, they held on to 1-0, but I said to the lads at half-time, you're going to get a lot more chances, let's hope we just stick them in, and of course we did. Maybe could have won by more, but I think the crowd have enjoyed it. 34,000 for a game like this, I think it's fantastic.
But that season began to unravel quite quickly. City exited the UEFA Cup very early, losing on the away goals rule to the Polish side Groklin in round 2. Then, after beating Southampton in November, they didn't win another Premier League game in more than 3 months, eventually beating Bolton in late February, 15 matches later. One highlight in that period, though, was a remarkable FA Cup comeback at Spurs, where City won 4-3 despite being 3-0 down at half-time and having to play the second half with 10 men. John Macken scored the winner that night.
I just remember the ball coming across and thinking, right, get your head on this, John, and see what happens. And just thankfully it went in, and there was no extra time to be played. You're 3-0 down, like you say, you just had a man sent off. You're thinking to yourself, right, okay, just go out and try and have a little bit of pride, try and stop them scoring, 6 or 7, and just try and keep it fairly respectable. And like I say, you get your first one and you think, right, okay, then hold on now, 3-1's not a bad result. And you get the second, you think, right, okay, this is it. And certainly when you get your third, you think, right, come on, man, your momentum's with you. You think, right, go on, push on, let's see what we can do.
City survived in the Premier League that season with a few key results in the springtime. They beat Manchester United in the first Eastlands derby, while crucial draws with Wolves and Leicester kept them at arm's length. Then beating Newcastle in early May basically ensured survival. By this stage, though, it was clear the spark had gone from Keegan's time at City. He'd already said that he would be retiring at the end of his contract, but as the next season became a bit of a slog, the manager ended up stepping down 15 months earlier than expected. It brought to an end an era that had so much promise and where so much had changed at the club, but ultimately it would be the Maine Road years that Keegan would be remembered for during his time in Manchester.
Hi guys, it's David Seaman, ex-City player. I've played a few times for Arsenal as well, and England, but you're listening to the Blue Moon podcast.
You're listening to the Blue Moon podcast. Please give the show a rating and review wherever you can.
So Liam, when you think back to that time, obviously relegation in 2001, following the back-to-back promotions, obviously the joy of getting back into the top flight, followed by the disappointment of not staying there. Then the news: Joe Royle's been sacked, and the guy that's brought you all of this joy back into your life has lost his job. But then it's Kevin Keegan taking over. Like such a roller coaster of emotions in just a few days there.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly sort of how I remember it. I can remember getting on the school bus, going home, and hearing that Joe Royle had been sacked. And yeah, I mean, we were disappointed that we'd been relegated, but I feel like he'd had so much. I think Royal had so much credit in the bank with the fans that we weren't. I don't really recall it that vividly, but I certainly wasn't of the opinion that he had to get sacked or anything like that, because he'd given us so much joy. But then when you hear who we're bringing in, because Keegan's previous job before coming to City was being the England manager, so it was. You wouldn't really. It'd be very surprising, if you go back a year or two from now, and if a team who'd just been relegated got Gareth Southgate as the manager. But Keegan, had a lot more charisma and, had managed Newcastle to, second in the league and things like that. So it was, as you say, a real roller coaster of emotions, because sad that Joe went, because an ex-player that did his best as a manager, but then getting in a really, really exciting manager who you knew was going to be able to attract the best players possible for trying to get back out of that division.
Andy, the perfect club for him as well at the right time, because obviously his stock was quite low after the England after he resigned from the England job, because he was kind of seen as a bit of a quitter, as someone who didn't see it out to the end, and someone who wasn't you hear him speak in that feature there. He talks about how he hadn't been good enough, and kind of he thought that of himself. And then here's this club that's a little bit down on its luck, that has just been relegated. It's kind of perfect for him to come in and go, you know what, my charisma, if nothing else, my charisma is going to lift this place up.
Yeah, I mean, I always disagreed with the quitter title that he was given, not by the press though, mainly. I also was a fighter. He was a fighter when he was a young player coming through at Scunthorpe. He was always the fittest lad on the pitch and everything else, and he was always a fighter. I thought it was disrespectful of him to call him a quitter. I think what he knew, though, more than anything, was he was honest with himself, and he knew when it was the right time to go and when it was time to move on. There's a lot of people who won't do that in life, and he wasn't that guy. He was very, very honest with himself, and I kind of respected him for that, if I'm being honest. So when he quit England, I think after that 1-0 defeat against Germany at Wembley, I think Didier Mann scored, I think, if I remember rightly. I thought it was really sad for him, because I felt as though, he's such a patriotic guy, giving everything, and he just knew it wasn't right for him, and for England. It's quite a brave move, that, actually, if you want my opinion on it. So when he came to City, I was delighted. I think it was the right club for him, because we were a big club, but we hadn't done anything big, and we were up and down, and we needed somebody to lift the spirits of the club, to make us dream a little bit again. And I think as Liam quite said, there's getting off the school bus or whatever, and me as an older guy, seeing, hearing that Kevin Keegan's come to the club, it was just a fantastic feeling. You felt $1 million. How we did it, I don't know, but it was such a great signing for us.
Yeah. What do you think his arrival changed at City, Liam? Just in that instant, before a ball had been kicked, like him being the City boss, what does that change?
Well, I think we were probably going down, and the size of the club that we were at the time, we were probably already favourites to go back up. But I think that really cemented, how the club going back into the second tier. It wasn't just like we're favourites. It's like, well, we've I guess it put a bit of pressure on us in a way that we had a really big name to come in. So. It definitely made us as a fan base be very positive. I remember feeling like this can only lead to good things. And so, yeah, I think I think in the first place, you're wondering what sort of players he's going to bring in, because I think the brand of football that he'd played, especially at Newcastle, was so exciting, and you just wondered, where's he going to pluck some of these players? Because I think the club at the time, we'd had a lot of players there who had been with the club on a pretty mad journey, really, from relegation in sort of 3 or 4 years earlier to going back up to the Premier League. And, I think we probably needed to change things ever so slightly and, sort of freshen up the squad. I think there was a lot of those players who still did a job for City in that season. But, I think we were excited for fresh faces coming in anyway.
If your business runs on 5 different apps, 12 browser tabs, and one spreadsheet that everyone's afraid to touch, it's probably time for Odoo. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that connects every part of your business into one powerful, easy-to-use platform. So instead of wasting time switching between disconnected systems, your entire business works together in real time. Your team moves faster, your data stays accurate, and you can actually focus on growing your business. Let one unified system run your entire business. From the first opportunity to the final payment, everything works together in one place. Whether you're a small business or managing a large operation, Odoo gives you one flexible platform built to grow with you. Learn more at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
Become a member and listen ad-free. Go to members.bluemoonpodcast.com.
Joe Royle always called the allegations of them being a pub team unfair, Andy. But did it get more professional when Keegan arrived, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that you noticed straight away was some of the players that it wasn't a pub team. I don't think anyone ever said that. I think what it was a team in the old-fashioned way. In fact, that players went out drinking more than other clubs, and I think what Keegan wanted to do was bring that professionalism back that he had himself into. He set his example. By the way, he's not as though he's one of those hypocritical people. He would set an example of being, an ultimate professional, and expected players to be that as well. And he'd give everything, and he expected them to do it. And I think that's why you get some of the players. You see the list of players that left when were going. I mean, the only mistake I thought he made, if I'm being honest, was Mark Kennedy, because I think Mark was definitely, liked a night out and a good time and everything. But I think he was one of those players that could perform on the pitch as well, And I think, like Brian Robson did for United, famously, And I just think that although I understand it for the money, I just felt as though that was probably the only call I would say that he got wrong at that time, because I think
Kennedy also says, the way Kennedy describes it is he basically wasn't given a chance at City. It was almost Keegan coming in and going, I am like, it was kind of twofold. You had the kind of one of the ringleaders of the kind of social side of things going, but also you had, if the rest of the squad look at it and go, well, if Mark Kennedy's not safe, none of us are safe.
Yeah. So I do get the psychology around that. Mark was a big, but also by the same way, you could say that if he took Mark to one side and got him on side, like Hoddle did at Wolves, by the way. Like Hoddle made him captain at Wolves, and he had a really good part of his career there. I think if Kevin could have done that, then maybe he would have done what he did at Wolves with us. He'd have been a leader and in a different way. You know what I mean? And with his left foot, and he has a wand of a left foot, and the way Kevin played, I thought it would have been. I think that's the only regret I've got. I think of the whole time with Kevin, really, at the club. But I think he did do the right thing. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
Yeah, Liam, you look at the players they brought in that first summer as well. This is the final season before the transfer window, so they could make deals kind of all the way through the season. But before a ball was kicked, Isle Berkovic and Stuart Pearce came in, and they're a calibre of player that is above what City have been going for previously.
Without a doubt, yeah. Stuart Pearce, who was probably late 30s at the time, but had so much experience playing in the top division. Playing for England. International experience and a real leader. I think it wasn't just a signing for that season. It was probably an investment into what ended up happening. Him being a coach for us and a manager further down the line. And with Isle Berkovic, he was, again, someone with lots of experience playing in the top division, and just a creative player where, he got you out of your seat. And, we definitely saw that in that first year, especially.
Without Keegan, you probably don't attract them down into the second tier, do you?
No. I mean, not with the, again, without being hard on Joe Royle, but they weren't. Well, Pearce probably was, but you wouldn't say Berkovic was particularly a Royle type player, whereas he was definitely a Keegan type player. It was a different type of player to go for, but then also a different type of player that we would be able to attract as well, being able to drop down a division. And also, I think, I know it wasn't a new signing, but someone like Paolo Wanchope, who was probably too good for that division, stayed with City instead of, he could have quite easily gone to somebody else who'd been promoted, or any position really in the top sort of 10 would have been interested in Paolo Wanchope at that time, but he stuck at the club. And I think a lot of that you would say was down to Keegan as a manager.
Yeah. Liam, what do you remember of those kind of early weeks? Because it was very up and down from my memory. They battered Watford. I remember them getting battered by West Brom. They got battered by Wimbledon. It was just goals at both ends, like each week.
I went to that West Brom away game when we lost 4-0. Me and my dad went to it. It just felt like, and I think Keegan said it, didn't he, that he sort of felt like he needed to give the majority of the team a chance, despite what Mark Kennedy says. He needed to sort of let them have a go in the team, but I think that was the turning point around that sort of time against West Brom, where I think he thought some of these players aren't really up to it. And, as you say, there wasn't a transfer window at the time, so we had the opportunity to sort of get a few out and get a few in. I remember, being at school and a few lads asking me about, well, how do you think City are going to get on? And I remember thinking that, but it's probably a season too soon with the way that we've changed the way we've played. Obviously, things turned out completely different, and we we stormed the title. But yeah, those first few weeks, it felt like it was all. We were probably like one player perhaps short, who we ended up bringing in, that one player, I think, with Ali Benarbia. I think he was someone that was, definitely changed the way that we were. And at first you weren't too sure what we were really going to be getting, because, as I mentioned earlier, there was quite a lot of pressure on us, because we were obviously probably the biggest club in the league, and had such a famous manager that you were expecting us to get promoted, but getting into September, October time, it wasn't clearly going to happen at that point.
The signings that during that season, Andy, I think it says a lot, doesn't it, about Kevin Keegan and how he viewed football. That he wanted his midfield to be, a combination of Ali Benarbia, Al Berkovic, a bit of Sean Wright-Phillips in there. It's just like creativity left, right, and centre.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's like you say, it sums him up, but also sums up why the results were like they were, because you just basically went to watch a football match there at Maine Road, or even if you go to an away game, and you didn't know whether if we were going to score 3, were they going to score 4, or was it going to be the other way around? And at that time, we'd have took that. As long as we stay up, we'll take that, because we just wanted entertaining, and that's what you got with that midfield. That midfield was sublime, wasn't it, to watch? Yeah. Beautiful footballers, but we struggled with a backbone a little bit. But that was he did the same at Newcastle, by the way. He was always being criticised at Newcastle for his lack of defensive qualities in his back line. So nothing was, it was the same at City.
Yeah.
But I quite enjoyed it. I think most of us did.
And as Liam says, kind of storming to that title, it was weird watching a team be so good that they could regularly have players sent off and still dominate games and look like they played 10 on 11. Like I think they got 9 red cards that season. And you wouldn't have known it.
Don't get about 4 of them or something.
Well, it was weird. There was one for that. Like every player only got one. There was
really?
Yeah. Oh, there was about 9 or 10 different players that all got sent off that year. But it was like there's such a gulf in quality, Liam, between what City were playing and what everybody else in the division was doing. I mean, the one Andy's talking about there was, I think Richard Dunn was sent off in the FA Cup away at Newcastle. And again, Newcastle, Premier League team, City there, top of the Championship, still absolutely taking the game to Newcastle.
Yeah, I mean, not just a Premier League team, but they were, probably in the top four at the time, I would imagine. They were, I think Bobby Robson was their manager at the time, and they had a younger Craig Bellamy, and, well, they had a great team, basically. And yeah, I remember us going there I think it was a Sunday night game, wasn't it, on TV? And we went toe to toe with them, and you wouldn't, if you didn't know much about it, if you were just an observer, you wouldn't know that we were a team in the lower leagues. And, I think at that point we were quite confident that we'd get promoted, but then I think as well it gave us a lot of confidence to think, well, actually, next year it's not going to be like what we had under Joe Royle 2 years earlier, where a bit of a false dawn, getting promoted and then having quite a miserable season, never really looking like we were going to stay up. It was, and I think that only gave us more confidence to finish the season strongly like we did.
Yeah, I can tell you the Newcastle team: Given, Elliott, Hughes, Distan, O'Brien, Speed, McLean, Robert, Solano, Shearer, Bellamy. So they didn't shy away from putting out a strong team. Richard Dunn sent off after half an hour, and City lost it 1-0 with I remember a slightly dodgy Roberto Solano goal. I think he fouled Richard Edghill on the way through.
I remember the goal going in, but I can't remember the build up to it.
Yeah, I think he fouled Richard Edghill on the way through. But I was in the away end again.
You held that for a long time though.
It's an injustice that never sat right with me. Well, as we talked about promotion that year, Andy, record goals, record points. What did that do for City? Just off the back of having, they'd had back-to-back promotions, they'd been in the Premier League recently, they'd been disappointed, as Liam had said, and came down. But going up as Division 1 champions in the manner that they'd done it, what did that do for the next season?
I think the manner of it was the fact that we went up with confidence that Kevin could take us on to the next level, what Liam just said, really. And I think that's what it's about. I think it's that vibes thing, that the crowd also, we're believing that we can survive in the Premier League under a Kevin Keegan stewardship. And that's something that we never really felt, I don't think, for a few years. We always felt that, we're going to go up and, let's just try and get to 40 points or 38 or whatever it is and try and stay up. Whereas I think a lot of us felt, certainly a lot of my friends, we felt that this was a new era. This is a time when we're going to go up there and we're going to stay up. And maybe, the year after this, or 2 years after, we'll be heading to Europe and, Kevin, because he'll bring better players in and everything else. And I think that's the first time I felt like that for a long, long time. So yeah, it was just the way we won it and the players that we had. And because you knew as well that Kevin, as Liam just said, Kevin could get anybody he wanted. He was that sort of that manager. He had that sort of personality and that aura about him, really, as a person.
Yeah, it was 3 summer signings, Liam. Peter Schmeichel, I don't know how you felt about that, but the 2 kind of huge ones that again changed things at City. Sylvain Distan coming in from PSG and Nicolas Anelka also from PSG. Anelka had been on loan at Liverpool at the back end of the previous season, as we heard. Distan on loan at Newcastle. So, these are opportunistic signings, but these are world-class players that are now coming to City.
Yeah, I think with the Schmeichel thing, it was a bit of a weird one because obviously he was such a legend at United, but then he'd done really well at Villa the previous season, or maybe even 2. I can't remember how long he was at Villa for, but I think there's a lot of us of a similar age who were big Nicky Weaver fans, so I think I was a bit mixed emotions with it all, really. But yeah, I remember seeing the paper the day that we signed Nicolas Anelka, and you're just thinking, this is something completely different to everything I've ever known, really. Obviously I know the previous year we'd had some really good players, great players for City like Berkovic and Benabia, but the only sort of signing I can compare it to is when we signed Robinho, when the takeover happened. It was like, this is 2 or 3 levels above where I thought we were. Do you know what I mean? It sort of goes far beyond what you were ever expecting. And, I think when that season ended, in the sort of the championship season where we had Huckabee one shop go to Macon. You're thinking, they were pretty decent strikers to take us into the Premier League, but then for us to go for Nicholas Anelka, who was a world class. It was
played for Real Madrid. Real Madrid, ex-Real Madrid players don't come to City.
No. So it was so exciting. And again, you mentioned Distan, who we knew was a really solid player at Newcastle, but he ended up captaining the club and being a great servant for us for the next sort of 5 or 6 years. So it was a really statement summer when it comes to who we brought in.
Yeah, Andy, that season, that final season at Maine Road, Liam mentioned before the pressure of kind of having a big name like Keegan and having like the anticipation of winning the title in the championship. When you get to the final season at Maine Road, obviously, like there is always that fear in the back of the mind as a newly promoted team. You don't want to get relegated in your final season at a stadium, and it was just never in doubt. The way that City were performing under Keegan then, there's some great results in there. I mean, ultimately, we have to focus on the Manchester derby, the final one at Maine Road. But, I mean, it's City's first derby win in 13 years. Like, those things, like, they really kind of all add up in this one season to actually create something for the fans to get behind and remember.
Yeah, I mean, the previous season was a special season to watch as a fan, with everything else. But this season, like I said, it cemented us in the Premier League. Like I said, was it 9th we finished, I think, in the end? I can't remember. Was it 9th, I think? And, again, that derby win, I mean, it was just so special. I mean, from the tunnel with Schmeichel moving Neville over to the other side of the tunnel before the game, and then Schmeichel's celebrations when we scored, which still rankle United fans something special, which is quite nice. And then and also like Gary Neville was captain for the day, which was one of his first times as captain. He had such a bad day. He got hooked, didn't he, after about an hour or something, I think. So yeah, it was all in all, it was a really, really good day for us, that one. It was an absolute one for the memory bank. Yeah. So even though what's gone on after as well, by the way, even though we've booked, that's still one of my favourite games. So beating them after 13 years or whatever it was pretty special.
Yeah, Liam, I mean, obviously the derby special, but winning at Anfield as well, that never happens. He won there.
No, it doesn't happen that often. So yeah, it's it was, again, Keegan. I'm not just saying this because of what's happened, but he was one of those managers where it felt like he gave all the players a lot of belief, and to go somewhere like Anfield that we did that season, and to be behind until quite late on and ended up turning it around and winning, and the players that we just mentioned there about who came in the summer, Anelka and Schmeichel being like two of the standout players. He just, you wouldn't say he worked wonders, but it was, we weren't just a team that were trying to get there. We were a team that were like a serious threat for some of the bigger clubs now. And yeah, as Andy just mentioned there about beating United at home, and then we got the draw at Old Trafford as well. Just again, days where when we finally got into the top tier after a few years out of it under Royal. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm bad-mouthing Joe Royal here, but we just never felt like we didn't really, sort of land a blow on anyone, so to speak. We didn't bloody anyone's noses. So
yeah, this is it. Like under Keegan, though, do you feel like the club suddenly felt it belonged in the top flight?
Definitely, yeah, I'd say so. It felt like he believed in who the club were, and I think the previous sort of 5 years before him was more like firefighting as opposed to sort of putting belief into the club once again.
Yeah. Obviously, that season is. I wondered, Andy, if the signing of Robbie Fowler is the point at which, like, it doesn't start to go wrong for Keegan at this point. But I wonder if that's like firing the starting pistol on the beginning of the end, if that makes sense, because it split the boardroom. It meant that there was it was almost as if, like, Keegan would then be backed into, like, for whatever he wanted to do, and understandably so, given what he'd done previously with City. But it meant that this club was starting to spend money it didn't have, and then by the end of Keegan's tenure, that had become a problem.
Yeah, I think, and that's always a problem with some managers. They want to spend more money. They want to go to that next level and that next level very quickly. And I get that with Keegan, who's a very ambitious guy. He wanted the best, and but I think the Fowler, it wasn't the money was one thing, but it was more the fact that it wasn't working. He wasn't going to, him and Anelka for me individually, both brilliant players, both world class finishers. But when I watched them on the pitch, they were like playing a different game. They both wanted the same areas of the pitch, and I understood why he wanted them, but they were both too similar for me. As in, they both wanted to be around the box, and you didn't, playing 4-4-2 in the Premier League like that, with two players that basically would want the ball playing into them. It's very little movement, and I think one of them, you'd have somebody who played as if you could have got a younger Bernabei behind an Elka, that'd have been unbelievable. And I think that would have been. I think he brought McManaman to try and do some, to create something, but again, that didn't work because it was right at the end of his career anyway. So
yeah, this was it though, Liam. Like the start of the next season, like everything feels like it's heading in the right direction. City have moved to what's now the Etihad. They've qualified for Europe for the first time in what 20 odd years or so. They're bringing in still bringing in this sort of caliber of player, but the cohesion just wasn't really there, was it?
No, and just as a side point, all I would say as well about the move to the Eastlands from Maine Road, for me, it was, when I look back on it, I'm really glad it was him that was the manager there, because I feel like everything he said about Maine Road and, talked about how, it was our spiritual home and how much he talks at the new stadium. I always feel like he did a really good job being that guy that was there. And, I'm not sure saying that any other manager wouldn't have done it well, but I just remember thinking that like it was really sort of classy how he was the guy to sort of move the club over to something different and something new, and made it as much as he could try and make it feel like it was still the same club, even though for a lot of it didn't really feel like the same club at times. And yeah, that image of him, which is on the last ever programme at Maine Road, of him stood there sort of looking out onto the Kippax, is, I've seen it quite a few times in the past 24 hours. And yeah, it's quite an emotional image, to think about, he was our guy at our former home. But sorry, yeah, moving on to the actual question there. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, it's sort of qualifying for Europe can be a gift and a curse, can't it? I think we as a fan base are really excited to have potential trips to places and to see different fans coming to City. I mean, I was probably too young at the time to be following us all over Europe and things like that. But yeah, it was seen as a real sort of another step in the right direction to get the club further up the league. But I think the curse of it was Keegan felt like we had to invest in a squad. It wasn't just the 11 plus one or two others who would come on. He needed to bring a lot more experience, and he needed to bring players who had actually played at the top level across Europe. And we brought in a lot of players who, when you look up their careers, had fantastic careers, like Michael Tarnat and Paul Bosfeld, just to name two that stood out at the top of my head. But there was a lot more of them. Antoine Sibierski didn't have a great career, but was unknown to play in Europe. And I just felt like all of a sudden the squad felt quite bloated, and we'd sort of got away from what had made us so good the previous 2 years. And it just felt like we'd sort of changed our way of playing, and I think Fowler, again, which we just mentioned, he felt like a step in that direction as well, where he was a good player, but it was probably the wrong time of his career. And I think when you had so many players like that, replacing Schmeichel with David Seaman, another example, where it just felt like all of a sudden the age of the squad was completely off, and the how it all mixed felt really off. And I remember going to QPR away in the Cup that season, and I think we beat Southampton away that weekend, maybe 2-0, when I think that's the time when One Chop like shouts into the mic by the away fans. But I think after that, all these sort of like rumours came out about there being a bit of a split in the dressing room between, you had like Fowler, McManaman and Barton as like the Scousers, and then you had like the French with Distan and Elka, Sibierski. There was this sort of, it felt all a bit fractured, and we went on a quite a bad run for some time after that. And it just felt like all that enthusiasm and all that positivity that we'd had for building up for years just felt like we'd moved to this new stadium, and it didn't really feel like home, and the team weren't playing quite how we wanted them to play, and it all of a sudden felt like a bit of a mess quite quickly from my recollection.
You're listening to the Blue Moon Podcast. Follow us on Instagram. Search for Blue Moon Podcast.
Andy, how much of I mean, there was obviously the tragic death of Marc-Vivien Foé that summer between the move as well. Now, it was unlikely City were going to be able to sign him, but it still has an effect on the players that are there and the teammates that he had.
Yeah, definitely. I think like anything really, even you work with people, and something tragically happens to them. Even over a few months, you can get a bond with people, can't you? And especially from everything that anyone said, he was a lovely guy, really easy around the place. And also when you're young as well, it's always a massive tragedy, isn't it? When young people die, it's a massive tragedy. And the circumstances which he died on the pitch, I think that made a difference as well, because the people, young people, fit guys playing football obviously realise there's a mortality. There's life can go for you pretty quick, and I think a lot of people sit and think about that. That's a bit like the Yotta thing now. I suppose people say, "Oh, how can it have an effect?" But it's bound to have an effect on people. That sort of a young person dying. I think it must have had an effect on quite a few of the players. I'm not saying all of them, but certainly quite a few of them, I imagine.
Was there also an issue here with when you look at the players that Keegan replaced over this period? I mean, Liam's talked about the partnership between Anelka and Fowler and kind of the different cliques in the dressing room, and you talked about them not really complementing each other. You look at someone like Sean Gota, who was a great partner with Nicholas Anelka, but obviously was moving on at the end of that final Maine Road season. It was almost as if Keegan was one by one replacing the lads that Joe Royle had in his squad, and it was kind of like almost at all costs that it needed to be Keegan's squad rather than Royle's squad.
Yeah, and I understand that in a couple of ways, really. I understand it in the fact that he wants to put his mark down, and I get that. But I also understand it that he wants to try, in his view, bring in more quality. But the thing is that sometimes, as we all know, you take away the heart of that as well. So you take away the heart. I love the players that have given everything, and then the players that are left behind who've seen Sean Gota give everything for a few years and score lots of goals. They feel as though, first of all, am I next on the list? That's one thing, and then also they're thinking, well, he's my friend and he's going, and what's he done wrong? And so and the players then that come in, they've got a lot of pressure on them because like I know that's probably what led to the fractiousness in the dressing room and the divisions in there. All these things, you're bringing new players in regularly all the time, you're going to get those divisions because relationships have been built up over 2 or 3 years in there, and all of a sudden they're getting broken up. So yeah. I think that happens at every club really when you have quick changeovers.
Yeah, a couple of games I want to flag in, and Liam, you mentioned that really long winless run. In the middle of it all, City were doing all right in the FA Cup because they needed replays to beat Leicester, but that Spurs game, which is to this day still probably the most remarkable FA Cup tie there's ever been. 3-0 down, half time, a man down as well. Like, did you watch the second half? Did you give up on it? Did you? I don't know if you were at the stadium, but did you go home early or anything like that?
No, I watched it at home, and I don't know why I did watch it. I suppose it's I can remember it quite vividly, sort of being sat there in my living room at home, and
this lot can't win a game. They're 3-0 down and a man down. Why would you think they're going to get anything in that second half?
I have no idea, and yeah, it's an odd one, isn't it? I think it was probably one of them where I thought, well, I'll give it 10 or 15 minutes, and if they get another one and it's 4-0, then we'll switch it off. But I guess at that point, you just wanted to see if we'd show up a bit, really, I suppose. Because, Barton got sent off at half time, didn't he? And he was probably, apart from Wright Phillips, the only sort of energetic player in the team going forward, and you just didn't know how we were going to get back into the game, basically. And that was a bit of an odd Spurs side, really. They were sort of neither here nor there, but they had some really high quality players as well. They went on to be pretty good in the following seasons. I think David Pleat was their manager, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, because my mother was delighted that City had come back to win that game because she hadn't forgiven him for Luton.
But yeah, so it was just one of them where you're just thinking, why am I bothering with this? And then, over the next sort of 45 plus minutes, you see one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen, really.
Yeah. I remember it because we were on holiday for a week because my wife was pregnant with our son. And she said, I need to get away from work. So just for a week, she wasn't feeling great. Let's go and get a bit of sunshine. So we got away. And there was me and her sat in a bar on our own, watching the game. And obviously at half time, she says to me, should we go now? And I was like, no, I'm not going anywhere. And she's like, well, it's just, they're losing. And Barton gets sent off, and she's trying to explain to me why we should go. I was like, stubborn as anything, as usual. No, I'm not doing that. No, I'm staying. And with the same view as you had, Liam, let's just see if they score a goal. And then, obviously, when every goal that went in, I think the barman kept looking over at me when I was going mad in the bar with every goal. And then Caroline said, oh, well, you made the right decision. And I was like, yeah, it was a special day for me. It's only me and her in this bar. And this guy behind the bar must have thought I was a lunatic, honestly. But yeah, I refused to go. And I've been like that all the time. I don't like walking out. So
yeah, I was playing football that night, and it was a local five-a-side league in the team with me dad. And we went onto the pitch, and it was 3-0. And the referee we had that night, we knew was a United fan, and he kept looking at his phone and going, obviously getting a text or something. And he kept saying to me dad, Dave, it's 3-1. Dave, it's 3-2. Dave, it's 3-3. And my dad didn't believe him. He was like, "Oh, piss off!" Because we're obviously taking the piss out of this. Got back in the car, drove home, and then as we go through the door, my mum's like, "You know they've won, right? Don't they?" And we're like, "No, honestly, we thought he was taking the piss. This is great." Match of the day straight on and watch the highlights. It was incredible. Back end of that season as well, Liam. They beat United 4-1 at Eastlands, and that went a big way to ensuring survival for City. It just kind of goes to show that even if the momentum is leaving this Keegan team, there is still something there, isn't there? There's still kind of something that Keegan can bring.
100%, yeah. It was a proper magical day. That there's so many times where I could say that about when we've beaten United, but it's just one of them days where. Everything went in our favour, I would say, but which you need sometimes. But yeah, it's funny. I remember it quite vividly that my uncle's mate used to sit in front of us, said, "I'm going to put 4-1 on today for a bet." And I said, yeah, but I put 3-1 on because we always used to have a bet before. I was 16 at the time, so it wasn't me putting the bet on. Your Honour, yeah. But yeah, so I put 3-1 on. So when Sean Wright Phillips, this is when I used to sit in the East Stand as well. So when Sean Wright Phillips is hogging the touchline and just sort of as if he's completely out of juice and getting into the edge of the area and then whacks it in the top corner. I know that I've lost 35 quid or whatever it was, but Greeny in front of us got £100 for that goal going in because it was 100-1 for us 4-1. So yeah, Yeah, it was.
The consolation news about that as well is Sean Wright Phillips, when I spoke to him, he thought that ball was going out and he was only chasing it out of a sense of obligation that he had to, and then it stayed in and he was like, oh, I've got to chase this now, and carried it to the edge of the box, and he was just like, I'm too exhausted to do anything else, I'm just hitting it and it gives in off the bar.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Probably my favourite goal for years, I'd say. And until probably Aguero's goal, it was probably my favourite goal at City. But yeah, it was. Even though the wheels has fallen off quite sharply that season, it was a real high point in not just that season, in the decade. I would say it was a real high point when winning the game anyway. But when Wright Phillips made it 4-1. Just one of my favourite ever moments watching City.
There was one player in that derby that, again, this is the Kevin Keegan pull. Daniel Van Buyten signed for City on loan for the back end of that season. Only played 3 or 4 games, then got injured and wrongly sent off at Leeds and suspended. But again, it just kind of goes to show the even at this stage of his City career, the pulling power of Kevin Keegan.
He was way too good for us, wasn't he? I mean, by the way, with him and Richard Dunn, you didn't need fullbacks because their shoulder widths between them, they covered the pitch, didn't they? They were both massive, weren't they? But yeah, he was way too good. Watching him play as a centre half was just, he was so good, wasn't he? He just read the game so well. He was quick, he was strong, he was good in the air. He was way too good for us at that time, I think. Where did he go in the end? Do we know? Can you remember?
Was that the summer he moved to Hamburg?
That could have been, yeah. Could have been. But he was so good.
So that
really
was
good.
the summer he moved to Hamburg, and then a couple of years later moved on to Bayern Munich and spent nigh on a decade there.
Yeah. Well, that just showed how good he is that he went to Bayern Munich, didn't it?
Yeah.
He spent 10 years there, so...
Yeah. Now, Liam, I remember at the end of that season, Keegan giving an interview after they beat Everton on the final day. Keegan giving an interview basically saying there's no money left. So if you know any free signings, send them my way. And Dennis Stewart, when we spoke to him on the podcast years and years ago, one of his things about Keegan was that he said Kevin was a great motivator and a great manager in the short term but he needs that churn of players to be able to come in, have an impact, and that's what was lost at City. And when you look at that final season that Keegan had, that he left halfway through, I mean, the spark had run out, but they weren't in any danger of being relegated. They were kind of just consistently mid-table at this stage. The team looked a shadow of the previous teams, the Maine Road era. They lost 1-0 to Oldham in the Cup without really putting up any sort of fight at Boundary Park. But then they just kind of do enough in other games to win 2-1, 2-0, 2-1, and just kind of muddle on through. And Keegan at that point had already said he was leaving at the end of his contract and had already told the club that he was retiring at the end of that. You kind of get to this point with this season where everyone sort of realises this is it. It's kind of better for everybody if we just call it quits now. And I feel like that's a really sad way for it to go, given what we'd had at the start of his tenure.
Yeah, it just felt like all the excitement and the enthusiasm, and you could see it in Keegan's face when he was interviewed after games. That. When especially the last, sort of day or so, looking through all the pictures of when he won the championship with us and, when he first came to City, he looked so enthusiastic and had so much like life in his face.
Energetic, yeah.
Energetic, yeah. Whereas, it was... wasn't there towards the end. I just
remember it. I think it was his final game. Was his final game? It can't have been away at Norwich because they came back to win.
1-1 when Willow Flood scored, was it?
I thought it was away when Robbie Fowler nicked it at the end and they won 3-2, having been to the Delia Smith let's be having your game.
No, I think that might have been his last win, but I think it was actually. I'm sure we lost to home to Bolton, maybe.
Oh, it could be, yeah. But I just remember this image of him in the Norwich dugout in a leather jacket, just kind of looking like really sort of
like
tired. Yeah, just look really tired, and nothing like that man you described from the promotion season, Liam.
Yeah, I think the last sort of thing for Keegan was Anelka went, didn't he, in the January, I think, to was it Fenerbahce he went to?
Fenerbahce.
And he obviously knew that because Sean Wright Phillips was in the ascendancy, it was only a matter of time before, well, what ended up happening, Chelsea buying him for over £20 million was going to happen. And I think that, knowing that the money's run out, I've lost a bit of my spark and I don't know how I'm going to regather this, it did just make it a bit of a, I don't want to say procession towards the end, but it felt like all of a sudden, they always say it in football, well, in anything really, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. And it felt like we weren't moving forward. And, going back a little bit for what we were talking about, regarding like when Sean Gota left and a few of the other sort of Royal contingent, I think the issue there was whoever went, we didn't actually replace them with anyone better. And, I think we've, especially over the past decade or so, we've seen so many great players leave the club, but you don't miss them as much if we replace them with people who are equally as good, which I know is such an obvious thing to say, but it's just true. And I think, we lost those goals with Gota, and, I think, as I say, we probably lost a bit of our identity as we moved to the Etihad. And as I say, it just felt like we were getting slower, and there wasn't much excitement. And it was a sad sort of last few months, because there wasn't really anything in that year, that final season that he was at City, which stands out really as, I think we've spoken for some time here about some of the great moments, not just the promotion season, but like, even when things weren't going so well, the really standout moments like beating Tottenham in the Cup, or beating United at the first game at Eastlands. And I didn't really feel, it's a bit of a...
This season doesn't have any of that, does it? Yeah.
No, if you were to speak about that season in particular, you are going to talk about Pearce coming in and sort of rejuvenating, giving a bit more energy that we sort of lost after Keegan goes. So yeah,
it's mad the way you describe that, though, isn't it? That you got Kevin Keegan, the great motivator, and everything else, and then it needed Stuart Pearce, who nobody's ever called a great motivator, coming in to rejuvenate us. You know what I mean? And that just shows how low we were at that time, I think. So I think that was the problem, is that's how low we were, that Stuart Pearce brought us back up again. Sorry.
Andy, how should Keegan be remembered at City? Because the first two seasons, especially, the last two at Maine Road, fantastic football. And actually all that kind of negativity is only about 18 months of like the end of his time. And like you think of kind of where the club were when he left compared to where they were when he took over. How should the world remember the job that he did at City?
Well, for me, Kevin Keegan, well, first of all, made us dream again about watching football with a Manchester City team that would entertain us and everything. But also, he made us feel as though we were a Premier League club again. And I think he was the basis of that, of where we are today, really, coming through, because he cemented us as a Premier League club. Yes, he couldn't take us on to what we thought, as Liam was saying earlier, where we thought we might get like a Newcastle, where he might take us up to, the top 2 or 3 places in the league. But his story is that he took Manchester City into the Premier League and stabilised us as a Premier League club. And and people might say, well, is that enough? Well, for us at that time, absolutely. That was, and we have to. It's all right to say now about winning trophies and everything else that we've done now, but being a stable in the Premier League was back then was what we really dreamed of. And I don't think I'm wrong with that either. I think that was something that was that we needed more than anything as fans. And he brought us that, so I'm forever grateful for what he's done for our club.
Yeah.
So
we said before as well, Liam, that obviously his career is better remembered elsewhere away from City, but for City, like as Andy says, stabilising in the Premier League, City haven't been out of the Premier League since, and that I think that's an important thing, that he got them to a level where they could get up, compete, and survive.
Yeah, I think. Obviously, as you mentioned there, so many tributes will be from Liverpool, Newcastle, maybe in Southampton, and what he did on the pitch and in the dugout for England. But for a lot of us, especially of a certain generation, he was such an important person in taking City from being that yo-yo club that we'd been for years, or a team where it just felt like things were getting worse and rotting on the inside, to being an established Premier League club. And yeah, I mean, as Andy mentioned there, it wasn't quite getting in the top 3 or 4 like he did with Newcastle, but you look at 10 years earlier, after we left in sort of early 2005, and the previous 10 years until he'd come in, we were all over the place. You were on such a roller coaster ride, which bits of it we love and we write books about, David. But but at the same time, for a lot of us, we knew in that whole era from 95, 96 to 2002, we knew for those 7 years that City were a club that should be in the top flight and not a team battling relegation. He got us back to where we, at that time, believed we belonged, and who knows, we might be back to that mid-table team at some point in the future. But you can't take away what importance Keegan had to City fans. And yesterday afternoon when the news broke, I look on Instagram and everyone that I know, like my sisters who are quite a bit older than me, they're messaging me saying, "Oh, I can't believe Kevin's gone," because for City fans, he was such a huge part. And I think in the wider football circles, that probably gets completely overlooked. For that people don't understand how much he meant to us. But just you mentioned right at the start, David, and I know you put something online about hope he knew how much he meant to us. And fortunately, I was in the chairman's lounge at City about 3 or 4 years ago now, and he was in, and me and my mates got a picture with him, and he knew. And if he didn't, then after speaking to my friend Daniel Mallard for about 10 minutes, then he definitely knows now. But yeah,
because like you say, he's such a big part of this club's history. But it'd be very easy when he's walking down the street, or when he was walking down the street, if he bumps into Liverpool fans, bumps into Newcastle fans, they do the same. I'm sure City fans would have been the same, but it's just whether or not he actually realised the adulation that he deserved, that he should be getting.
I have one regret, and that is, do you remember when we beat Spurs 2-0 to basically win the league a couple of years ago? And I went to get the train from Hale, and I went to get some breakfast first to go down to London, and it's probably to meet you guys. And I went into a cafe near for some breakfast, and he was in there with his wife. And I thought, should I go and, because obviously the Spurs game, and then we were going to Spurs away. It was a big game, and I was like, should I go over and just sort of say hello and all this and the other? But he was with his wife, and I was like, I'll just leave it. I won't do it. Hopefully it'll be another time, when I see him in the street or something. And so my only regret now is looking back is I should have gone and said something to him then, really, because that would have been so nice, especially with it being the Spurs game as well was the last time, that with the FA Cup game being such a big game for his relationship with us. So I was a little bit of regret when I thought about it yesterday.
Yeah. Well, that brings this special Blue Moon podcast to a close. Thank you very much for listening, and thanks to our guests for this one. Liam Wright.
It's been a pleasure, mate. Cheers for that.
Thank you very much. And Andy MacNab.
Yeah, cheers. Really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be back in August ahead of the Community Shield, so I will see you then. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Blue Moon podcast. Ad-free shows and extra episodes are available by signing up as a member. Go to members.bluemoonpodcast.com for more details. And join us next time for another episode.
I recently got back from a holiday in Belek in Turkey. It was brilliant, but I did spend it looking longingly at the golf courses in the area. In reality, if I'd taken my clubs, I probably would have come back from that family holiday single. It's a brilliant place, stunning beaches, 5-star hospitality in some of the best hotels on earth, but for me, just getting out on those courses would have been the icing on the cake. Search Turkey on TripAdvisor now to book your ultimate golf holiday in the Turkish Riviera.